I'd like to thank Nextthink for inviting us to tell you about our little application experience journey and what it takes to get other people on board. So Nextthink is among a suite of powerful tools that enable us to identify issues before they become problems, ease silent suffering among our users, and provide actionable insights to partners across the ecosystem. But while we're DEX experts, we can't possibly be experts on every system that our team members use every day. That's why it's critical that we empower our partners with the valuable insights that we generate and expand our reach to anyone who can influence the experience. It's also equally important for us to have a common understanding across our company of what we mean by digital employee experience, how we quantify it, and the actions that impact it. And we do give a lot of attention to improving the experience, but we also emphasize the importance of preserving it and not allowing it to degrade. Just because it's already great doesn't mean that we can stop paying attention. Now, before we get too far into this, I want to share a little bit about who we are. Cox is a private, family-owned business with a stated vision to empower people today to build a better future for the next generation. And those 12 words actually permeate our culture. We literally include the company itself, along with its current and future employees, as a part of that vision. And that's why we place great and significant value on how we all experience work at Cox. The company was founded in 1898 by James M. Cox, who would later become the governor of the state of Ohio, and in 1920, he was the Democratic nominee for president with future President Franklin D. Roosevelt as his running mate. Governor Cox's purchase of the Dayton Daily News at age 28 was the start of what would become Cox Enterprises, and over the years, the company has expanded further into media, telecommunications, and automotive services. Earlier this year, we announced the formation of our newest business unit, Cox Farms, which is the largest and fastest growing indoor farming operation in the country. Currently, Cox is organized into telecom, automotive, and agriculture business units. Tim and I represent the smaller parent entity that ties it all together. Our team is part of Cox Tech Help, and that's a brand that we use to represent a handful of functions that typically serve as the entry point for IT. At Cox, the DEX team sits within Tech Help, which is kind of organizationally distant from some of the other areas that have a significant influence on digital experience, like application DevOps, cybersecurity, infrastructure, the teams that manage our network and our servers. This necessitates our strategy of sharing the gospel, as we like to call it, about DEX and getting buy-in from leaders and application owners across Cox Enterprises so that we can accomplish our mission. It's also noting that our other business units value digital experience, and we share data and best practices with each other when we can. Now, while our DEX team is often the first to identify potential digital employee experience concerns, we have successfully empowered others across our organization to use the same tools to delve deeper into the products that they own and support. This enables them to identify and tackle specific opportunities based on their own intimate knowledge of their platforms. Our growing army of DEX partners helps us achieve our mission of preserving and enhancing the digital experience for every team member at Cox. Some of our favorite targets to become a part of our DEX army are application owners. Now, we've learned from speaking with our stakeholders that the concept of application ownership is not well understood by some. So let's talk briefly about what it means to be an application owner. It's an application owner's job to ensure that the application that they own is performing optimally and that using it is a pleasant experience. And if it's not a pleasant experience, the owner is accountable for identifying who's responsible for improving it and driving any of the actions required to do so. Now, while the app owner is fully accountable for the customer's experience, applications have many components, each of which need to be optimally configured and high-performing to create the best experience. The owner usually doesn't have direct responsibility for most of the components that comprise the application ecosystem. Now, in our diagram, the app owner might lead a support team directly responsible for the software, But what if we theorize that improving the experience requires an external partner to increase performance of their cloud infrastructure and uphold their obligation to satisfy peak demand? Now, many of you have made that call before to a team that you depend on to deliver great experiences, and you've heard the same tired responses. An inquiry about network connectivity might be met with, well, it's green on our end. You talk to the server infrastructure team, they say, well, we haven't heard any other reports. Application experience is a critical tool that helps us combat these often reactive responses that lack contextual data. We work across the organization to ensure that application owners, support staff, cybersecurity, infrastructure, and other teams value and view experience through the same lens. Alongside the app owner, their key partners, we also monitor experience and we provide quantified data to share, giving app owners everything they need to make a compelling and often undeniable call to action. I'll hand it over in a minute to Tim to show you how we build our DEX Army. In a few minutes, he's actually going to share a real-world success story that's just like the scenario I described, in which the application owner leveraged AppX data to drive a vendor to action. Tim?
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. And just a little disclaimer. We've been working really hard with our 3-year-old on the importance of sharing. And last week, he was very generous and shared his daycare bug with me. So if I sound a little bit under the weather, it's all a part of my 3-year-old's generosity. So now, I could stand up here and present, some kind of anecdotal advice about working across teams to achieve a common goal. But we've heard all of that stuff before. I want to take you through our 3-part conversation approach that we've developed and that we use to engage with these application teams and recruit them into our DEX Army. I'm going to walk through each of those 3 parts step by step, much like we do in our 30-minute introductory meetings. And I want you to notice the intentional omission of one word throughout the presentation. So, part 1 of the conversation. What is NextThink? What is application experience? How does it work? So in just a couple of minutes, we give a quick overview of how the NextThink collector works together with the NextThink browser extension to collect data surrounding user experience for all flavors of applications, web, desktop, hybrid. We also like to emphasize that this infrastructure is already in place. There's nothing to stand up. There's no change management. There's no coding. It's all live. It's all operational. And we don't get into the nitty-gritty. We save as much time as we can for the core discussion. At that point, we dive directly into NextThink. No slides. Vic doesn't like slides. No slides. A real live demo of the platform by walking through an application experience dashboard. And while you can demo the dashboard of any application, if you can get one URL pattern of their application into a configuration, you'll really see their eyes open wide when you're showing them their data. We walk through the highlights of each tab. We show them patterns of usage by day, pointed out differences between page loads, transactions, and we note that the thresholds, key pages, those fine details are all configurable based on their input. If there's any kind of anomaly or spike in the graphs, we like to drill into it to show just how granular we can get at troubleshooting. That level of detail is probably overkill for most, any issue, but when they do need it, and they will need it, it's at their fingertips, all of that data. And I also like to reinforce that this is their dashboard. We all benefit from the data, but their window is going to look exactly like my window. And it's built based on their input because no one knows the application and what the experience should be better than they do. And we also like to briefly compare that basic bare bones dashboard to a fully configured one to show them just how, just a little bit of effort on their end, we can transform that into something that's really an invaluable tool for their arsenal. Now, we've got all of this data. But how do we use it to impact user experience? So that brings us to part 2 of our conversation. Sometimes it can be hard to see potential when you're swimming in all of the technical details. So come up for air, put it in perspective by highlighting real-world use case examples that put application experience in the spotlight. Now, if you're just getting started, NextThink has a couple of great resources to help you tell the story. The NextThink blog is full of use cases from, many different companies covering pretty much every function of the platform. Application experience is no exception. Similar for the on-demand webinars from NextThink. In fact, there's a great webinar in the library featuring 2 fellows from Cox Enterprises and how they leveraged application experience as part of their mission.
That's us.
That's us. Sorry. Anyway, there's some great starting points there to help spark ideas. And, while those examples are good at showing potential, once you can create your own internal use cases, you'll really bring the story home with applications, processes, and people that are familiar and relatable. If Dave's team can do it and they can get value out of it, we can too. And to help accelerate those success stories, look to teams that are DEX-friendly and share the same passion as we do about end-user experience. Also look to those applications that tend to generate incident tickets or outage notifications. Those could be the low-hanging fruit to provide quick wins and great stories. But whatever you do, document and capture all along the way. So you'll have more than just a narrative to tell when it's all over. The NextThink data is great, but it's gone before you know it. So now it's story time. Sit back, relax, except for you standing in the back. We like to call our collection of use cases the good, the bad, and the ugly, as each one showcases a unique approach of how we take the data from application experience and use it to preserve and enhance the digital employee experience. First, the good, showing how we're able to quantify and promote improvement in application experience. Our case was inside Cox. That's our intranet site, which underwent a complete platform migration and redesign. We partnered closely with the application team on this, building out the new application with key pages and transactions well before the launch date so that we were ready for go live. That allowed us to provide immediate feedback in those initial hours, including a number of 404 errors for bad links. Ask your APM tool to provide that kind of insight. And more of a retrospective role, and to highlight the improvement that we were seeing, we took those metrics around speed and reliability and compared the last 30 days of the old site to the first 30 days of the new site. And when we did, we were able to demonstrate in hard numbers, as you can see, a vast improvement in user experience due to faster page loads, fewer page load errors. The team loved the data, and, unrealized to them, as they were presenting that recap to others, they were helping us to spread the good news about application experience. It's Dave, one of the recent NextThink Ambassador Summits, someone made the comment, how do you sell your application team on application experience when you're telling them how bad their applications are? Well, the answer is you don't tell them how bad their applications are. When we partner with these DEX teams, we always focus on the positive outcomes. What improvement has been made? How much time has been saved? How much productivity has been returned to the company, but always in a positive light. Next up, the bad. In this example, we were able to uncover a trend of poor experience with a booking application we use for booking workspaces and meeting rooms. So after the first of the year, we had a more focused approach on return to the office. We noticed a trend of frustrating page loads at the start of every Wednesday. Once that pattern emerged, we preemptively reached out to the application team to give them a heads up on the issue. Well, that pattern soon became every Tuesday morning and every Wednesday morning. So, surprise, surprise, it followed the pattern of attendance on campus and hence the usage of that booking application. There were a few complaints that came in, but most folks simply suffered in silence, saying, well, on Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning, that's just how it works. And, it's hard to take that limited soft data and substantiate any kind of claim with the vendor. So we were able to create a detailed timeline of hard data, part of which you can see here, that showed both the typical experience and the trending pattern we were seeing a poor experience. We then took that and armed the application team with that data as they scheduled a call with the vendor to discuss. Then one Wednesday, the trend suddenly stopped. Page load times were steady and normal. Everything looked just fine. We reached out to the application owners to see what had happened, any changes that had been made. Well, their response, that's interesting. We had our call with the vendor this morning, but, they saw no issues on their end. We were the only customers having the problem. Insert your other standard vendor dismissive statement here. We later chatted with the team again after the root cause analysis session they had with the vendor. Turns out the vendor had increased capacity prior to that call. Application Experience is a great tool for holding SaaS vendors accountable because the numbers don't lie. And finally, the ugly. So in this case, we highlight the before, the during, and after of a critical outage of a popular HR platform. The vendor had an ISP issue that affected all the tenants in one of their data centers, and that included all of our Cox divisions. So by the time they had issued their initial alert, though, we'd been diving into the problem for 15 minutes, getting ahead of the issue, getting the application owners involved. Vendor communication can often be purposefully generic. They don't really know the extent of the problem. Or it could be specific, but lacking some detail, as it was in this case. They knew and they named the data center that was having the issue, but were our instances located in that data center? And who knew? Well, we knew. And throughout the entire outage, we knew. We knew who was impacted. We knew what the impact was. We saw an attempt at restoration. We saw that restoration attempt fail. We saw a subsequent and successful attempt at restoration, and most importantly, we saw our users back to work in the application with metrics that have returned to typical values and were stable. No mass collection of user reports, no guessing, and no waiting around forever for those vague communications from the vendor. In fact, we were able to call the all clear and inform our teams a full 90 minutes before that notification was sent from the vendor. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Three very different scenarios helping to showcase the range of potential and hopefully sparking some implementation ideas and overall interest from your application teams. So that brings us to part 3 of our conversation, closing the deal. At this point, you should have definitely piqued their interest, but there's likely some concern about the effort and the commitment required. Before landing in the world of DEX, I spent 30 years in the radio broadcast industry, and the best ideas in radio are always the ones you steal from someone else. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with 1010, WINS in New York. It's a legendary station that invented the all-news format. Their long-running slogan is, "You give us 22 minutes, we'll give you the world." So I had to steal that and use it in our case. But our twist on it is, you give us 30 minutes, we'll give you a dashboard. The point that we're getting across is that it's not a heavy lift. It's not a time sink. We start with one 30-minute session to gather more data around the application. What matters most? Do the defaults make sense? If we see impacts to experience, who needs to know? In some cases, we walk through the application on that call, getting details as we go. Sometimes we go on our own discovery mission and help fill in the blanks. Other times we ask for a login to help aid us in that, especially when it comes to configuring transactions. But we start simply with that one 30-minute request because it's hard to turn down a 30-minute meeting request. One thing we've also been focusing on as of late is the ongoing communication with these teams. The NextThink platform is constantly evolving. Applications are continuously changing, so it's important to keep the lines of communication open. And even if there's no changes to report from either side, it serves as a reminder of the tool and our dedication to user experience. That one word that was never mentioned, any guesses? Performance. We don't mention performance.
Thanks, Tim. Now it's time for you to go build your own army. These are the steps. They're pretty simple. First, you have to understand the mission. What are you trying to achieve? Who are your soldiers? What soldiers do you need to be a part of your army? Do you need app owners? Do you need your network team, compute, storage, business owners, leaders, and executives? It's going to be a little different for everybody, but you've got to figure out who your soldiers will be. Then gather everyone together, create that shared understanding, what you mean by digital experience. Create that common language. Align on your metrics and targets for digital experience, for application experience in particular. Determine what's good, what's bad, and what's ugly, right? Those can be part of the conversation. Next, move on to creating some of those basic AppX profiles that Tim referenced. Just grab a URL, throw it into the system, see what kind of data you can come up with, see what kind of use cases you can come up with. You can create the base ones for the troublesome apps, and maybe some more detailed ones for applications you own or people you have good relationships with. Now generate your success stories. Find the good, find the bad, find the ugly. Tim mentioned this, but I'll reinforce it. If you see something interesting, save it, because grab a screenshot, do something, because the data will go away. Did you help someone? Maybe they sent a thank you note, or maybe you can follow up for their reaction. Use their name, use their picture, make it relatable when you talk to others. Now, take it on the road. We call this our road show. You may call it a dog and pony show. Talk to your leaders, task them to line up their peers and their teams. Ask for just 20 minutes at their staff meeting just to introduce this concept. Pique their interest and ask who else you should show this to. Now, after a few months, you'll have some successes from your first roadshow audiences to share with your later roadshow audiences. And then comes the very best part. You'll be walking around one day, you'll be on an elevator, you'll be in a meeting, and somebody will walk up to you and they will say, I heard about this application experience thing you guys do. Can we have it too? That's when you'll know that you've succeeded. When they hear that you've heard someone else, they'll want that. And that's when you know, we did it, we're on our way, and we're going to make application experience a success. That's all we got. Any questions from everyone? Love to take them. Yes.
I think you briefly touched on it, but as far as transactions, do you rely on the application owners to consistently create some transactions, or do you give them access?
The question is, do we rely on application owners to assist us with transactions, or do we give them access to do it themselves? Tim, you want to take that?
Do you give them access?
Most of the time, we try to walk through.
The question is, do we rely on application owners to assist us with transactions, or do we give them access to do it themselves? Tim, you want to take that?
Just because
most of the time we try to
we
walk
know
through
how to work it better than anyone else, and we don't want to put the burden on them. So
just because
we kind of walk through the application with
know
them,
how to work it better than anyone
gather
else.
The transactions,
and we don't want to put the burden on
like
them.
a shared
so
session.
We kind of walk through the application with them,
Way in the back. Talk loud.
gather the transactions through like a shared session if need be.
Way in the back. Talk loud.
I'm on with the personal member. How's your team structured? Is it you have like a DEX?
So the question is, what does our DEX organization look like? There's three of us. The third person is brand new. Avery's sitting down here listening to us.
So the question is, what does our
I'm the
DEX
leader on the
organization
team.
look like?
Tim does all the
There's
dirty
three
work.
of us.
Tim really is the one who
third
goes out
person
and
is
does
brand
the
new.
road
Avery's
shows.
sitting down here
Our
listening
leaders,
to us.
myself and Vic, who's also here, kind of helps
I'm
set
the leader on the
stage for
team.
us.
Tim does all the
but
dirty
it's really
work.
just
Tim
a-
really
really
is the
a-
one who goes
a
out and
two-man
does the
show
road
at this
shows.
point with
Our
hands on the
leaders,
keyboard.
myself and Vic, who's also here,
Organizationally, we
kind of
sit
helps
within
set
team
the
member
stage for us.
experience, which is,
But it's really just a
our specific
two-man show at
organization
this
is
point
essentially
with hands on the
end-user
keyboard.
support. Other
Organizationally,
parts of
we
that
sit within team
organization
member
include
experience, which is
human-centered design.
our
and so forth.
specific
But
organization is
typical
essentially
traditional
end-user
end-user
support.
team.
Other parts of that organization include enablement and human-centered design and so forth. But the typical traditional end-user support team.
Got it. Thanks.
Yes.
Maybe what configuring pages? Have you run into multiple pages to create similar formulas?
Sure. So the question is, when we're configuring an application, do we run into issues with URLs that have the similar pattern and trying to distinguish between them as we're monitoring? So Tim, you want to try that one?
Not really. Yeah, we really haven't seen that much so far.
Okay.
Yes. Digging a little deeper on later sessions and capturing the transactions and things like that. A lot of that action be SSO or at least in my environment, we're working across some organizations that have some divisions. Have you found there's a couple ways of how to cross those hurdles in capturing that, given that, are you granting them access in that same doing capture, or are you actually running those sessions? It's like, generally, I won't have access to the application. They won't necessarily have access to the next thing you can capture. So how are you technically bridging that cut?
So all of the applications that we have configured are applications that are owned on our side with our division. So we haven't really run across that particular challenge. I think a similar challenge that we have run across is that people in other divisions use our applications that we host. And so that's a little bit of a blind spot for us because they may have their own Nextthink instances or they may not have it at all, but we aren't able to necessarily put all that data together. So our division kind of acts as a proxy for application experience to the other divisions.
Okay.
And one thing we've also worked with on some applications too that are heavy on transactions is getting a login. It may just be a limited login, but that lets us get to the pages that we need to get to help configure those transactions. And we've never ran into a block when we've asked for just a very basic limited login to assist in that.
I think we have time for maybe one more over here.
I know you're application specific, but it's a structured to wave into endpoint data. So
Yes. Yeah. So Tim, the question is, do we do anything with the endpoint data itself? Yes. Tim and I and Avery, everything in Nextthink is ours. So all the data, we act on all of it. This is a small but kind of growing piece. It may be, I would say, the most visible and important piece right now for us is application experience. One more in the back. Last one.
Do you ever get asked by the application owners to change the default thresholds of the page loads?
We offer to. The question is, do we get asked to change the default thresholds for page loads?
We have not so far.
All right. We're out of time. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.